Good morning and welcome to Friday's OTB AM on this very chilly January Friday morning. We're delighted to have you alongside us this morning, and alongside me is Owen Sheehan. Very good morning to you, Owen.
Good morning, Adrian. How are things?
Things are very good. They're a bit better, actually I'm a bit more jumpy this Friday than I was last Friday.
Why?
You might remember I had the pan pipes in the taxi on the way in last Friday, and it left me in a very chilled humour for the entire day, I have to say. I was very relaxed, got very little work done off the back of it as well. But this morning I had a taxi driver who was hell-bent on getting me to work. To be fair to him, under no instruction, as quick as he possibly could, which meant sort of general disregard for the rules of the road and traffic lights. So I'm
not sure.
A bit jumpy.
I'm not sure, was it like pan pipes last week when you were kind of reclining in your chair with bloodshot eyes? But it's a good excuse, and I'll take it as fact.
You went out afterwards last week and sort of YouTubed pan pipe music, and sort of went through the general gamut of Ave Maria on the pan pipes, etc.
No, I just Google imaged it and I was like, yeah, that's the thing that I was thinking of. It was a good description, in fairness. Okay. Wooden tubes that you blow into, which I think was your...
explained.
Yeah, it was well explained, so fair play to you.
All right, get your comments into us. What's the mood with you like on this Friday morning? Hashtag OTBAM. Get your comments through to us here on the Facebook page as well. A busy show for you coming up today between now and 9 o'clock or thereabouts. We're going to be talking about one of the maddest stories of the year. I mean, it's a young year, but it's certainly one of the maddest stories of the year so far. Peter Crouch possibly on his way to Chelsea. We're going to get you all the very latest from across the back pages of the newspapers this morning as well. Joe Conroy, our own Joe Conroy, has been out to speak with UFC star Darren Till, so good stuff there to come. We're going to speak to the former Ulster and Italy second row, Carlo del Fava, who was just an interesting story of Carlo del Fava in the context of everything that's been going on with the Gerbrandt, Grobler and Munster story this week. Del Fava himself, a player who was banned for 2 years for taking anabolic steroids. So we want to speak to him about his story as opposed to the Grobler story. Kevin Kilbane, we're going to speak to him about some of that mad stuff, including Peter Crouch and some of the other transfer bits and bobs, and VAR as well, potentially. We'll come up with Kevin Kilbane. But if you have any questions for him, do get them into us. We're going to speak to him, I think, around about 8:30 or thereabouts. And the barometer with a bit of a twist this week. It's not really a barometer on this week. It's more of it's a list of stuff, bits of abuse we've been getting over the last 10 days.
Is the barometer not always a list of stuff?
Yeah, but it's like a reverse order 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 list of stuff.
Shame on me for getting the format of that wrong.
Yeah, look at on, it's not as if, you've been sitting alongside me here for the last 12 or 13 weeks, whatever it's been. So that's the order of things to come. So do keep your comments and tweets and all that good stuff coming into us. We're going to get a look at the back pages, I think, to take a bit of a view on what's going on.
Yeah, I think we may as well just get the rugby stories out of the way first, and we'll start with the Irish Daily Mail. Let him play, it reads in block caps. Stander says Grobler has paid his dues. That's an exclusive by Liam Higney there. CJ Stander insisting that Grobler has indeed paid his dues for his 2-year ban for doping and just standalone use. So it's interesting stuff from Stander. It's obviously we've had some of the players come out this week, and Conor Murray has also been quite strong in his defence. But what do you expect from his teammates, to be honest? And why on earth are we actually listening to the players in the first place when this is really nothing to do with them? It's a Munster story of a different angle on the front of the Irish Times sports pages. Kicking King Murray is happy to take on new responsibilities. It's Jerry Thorney's piece saying that the scrum half is embracing fresh attacking plays and long-range goal-kicking role. And then the last rugby lead of the morning is in the Irish Examiner, who are going with a picture of Eddie Jones. They say the England coach has Ireland in the crosshairs for Six Nations shootout. That is, of course, the last game of the Six Nations once again this season. And hopefully it will be for a Grand Slam from an Irish perspective this time. It could be a Grand Slam off. Let's hope so. Yeah,
a Grand Slam off, yeah. It's an odd sort of story in the front page of the Examiner this morning, given that the game is the 17th of March. It's a while away. We're obviously on the cusp of the Six Nations, but...
The build-up begins now, Adrian.
Build-up begins now. You've heard it here first, or on the Examiner first, as it turns out. Right, couple of stories dominating here on some of the tabloids. The Irish Daily Star, to begin with. Put your shirt on Sanchez. United closing in on the Chilean here, according to Mike Whaley, a story that's been fairly well reported across all the back pages of Chelsea eyeing Enrique as well. This is a story that does pop its head up every Friday or thereabouts, that the succession plan for Antonio Conte is in full swing, and that Luis Enrique is among the options there, according to the Irish Daily Star this morning. On the Herald, it's a bit of a different take here. £1 million a week. Why not, says Arsene Wenger. So this is in the context of all the stories that have been going on about Alexis Sanchez, particularly on his $500,000 a week to go to Manchester United. So Wenger saying that actually we're not far off. having a time where a player earns $1 million a week. And finally from me for the minute, the back page of the Irish Sun this morning. Crash Yang Wallop, it's the headline of the day really as far as I'm concerned. Sanchez told to train with the kids, so he's out of favour obviously with Arsene Wenger. Aubameyang's 53 million move to the Gunners, he's also out of favour at his own club. And Wenger branded disrespectful by the Germans. So there we go, that's more transfer stuff on the Sun this morning.
On the back of the Times Ireland edition, we've got Paul Lambert saying, "I won't exile Ireland again." I initially thought he was referring to the country, but he's referring, of course, to Stephen Ireland. Stephen Ireland, of course, had a pretty bad time under Lambert before. That was more to do with cost-cutting and cutting wages and stuff like that. But Paul Lambert says this time he's got trust in Stephen Ireland, or Stephen Ireland should have trust in Paul Lambert himself. So it seems like the future is pretty bright for Stephen Ireland, as long as they manage to avoid relegation. He did, however, the one caveat here, is that he mentioned his fitness, and that looking at Paul Lambert's quotes this morning, it sounds like Stephen Ireland's minutes might be managed a little bit better, right. AKA you're going to be dropped for a couple of games, Stephen.
Yeah, and he won't exile him obviously as long as he continues to play well and, you know, is a bit of a team player and all that.
Yeah, you might want to start converting a few of those chances though, because it's only so long you can start living off the idea that you're getting into good positions or your fitness looks well. Actually putting that ball in the back of the net like you should have done on one or two occasions the other night should have that might start to become a negative against him. But of course the big football story is Derby versus Bristol City. It's tonight at 7:45, and Derby hotshot looks a huge threat apparently to out of form City. It's the Racing Post of course here, and it's Vidra there in the back. Bank on Vidra to ram it home.
There you go. Right, the front page of the Irish Independent Sports section this morning. Pretty good photograph here of Gael Monfils as he was getting dumped out of the Australian Open overnight. It's temperatures between 45 and 50 degrees in Melbourne. It's sweltering stuff. I don't know how you compete when temperatures are that high. But as we mentioned, one of the stories of the year so far, Chelsea weighing up shock bid for Peter Crouch, who turns 37 in a few days' time, and has, muscled his way back into the Stoke first 11 plans. But regardless of any of that, Andy Carroll has an ankle injury. He's going to be out for a while. So Chelsea say, bizarrely, they want Peter Crouch. And also mentioned for Westmeath, it's the only time they're going to get in the back pages on over the course of the year. So there's a lot of controversy about the O'Byrne Cup final and where it should be played. It's Westmeath and Meath this weekend. It's going to be in Portlaoise, I think, by all accounts. I know this is very much on your radar of things to watch.
Well, the 2014 derby, or the 2015 derby, it's like whenever any match occurs between Meath and Westmeath at this point, it's like, do you remember that classic in 2015?
Absolutely.
And of course you'll never forget it, but I know we're only 3 years out of it at the moment, but I think that game will just be repeated and repeated and repeated, because they do meet quite a lot. I think they've met in the last 2 seasons in Championship football, haven't they?
Yeah, it's one of those rivalries where we Westmeath hates Meath, but they don't really care about us because
why would they?
All the success.
Far more successful.
It's like the Ireland-England thing, New Zealand-Australia thing, Canada-America thing. We're the Canada in this discussion, unfortunately, as it turns out.
I don't know, like it's...
You wouldn't know about these things, Owen, coming from where you come from.
Painting yourself as Canada is probably putting yourself in a very bright light there. I would rather be Canada in the American discussion than you in the Meath discussion, because considering many situations at the moment, I'd almost rather be Canadian than American.
Well,
I wouldn't rather be from Westmeath than Meath, though.
As more of a powerhouse, you know what I'm saying. Right?
Okay, fair enough.
The Irish Mirror this morning, Blue Peter. Again, it's in contention here for the headline of the day. Chelsea want the big man, and they don't come any bigger than Stoke City striker Crouch at 36. It's a Mirror exclusive on. We had a Mirror exclusive last week as well that actually came via the Guardian. But Darren Lewis writing here that Peter Crouch as a sensational new target for Chelsea, and new owner at Dundalk as an American consortium look to take over the League of Ireland club. And also in the Guardian this morning, Chelsea accused in FIFA investigation champions could face transfer ban with questions over deals for 25 players. They've come out and said that nothing to see here, everything fine, business as usual from Chelsea's point of view.
Yeah, I think they're in a spot of bother with that. I'm not sure will they actually get a transfer ban, but it seems to me from David Heitner's piece that he's outlined there that there's no escaping the fact that Chelsea have done a lot of wrong here, because the laws that dictate transfers means you can't sign somebody under the age of 18 from outside the European Union unless their parents have moved to the country, in this case England, for work purposes or for other sort of necessary reasons. Moving as a result of your footballing career because you're going to get a lot of money as a 16-year-old is not a good enough reason. And Traore, the guy in question here, was 16 years old when he was signed. There's absolutely no indication that his parents have moved over for work reasons. Essentially, Chelsea poached a teenager from Africa, and that is illegal.
Maybe the most surprising thing about that is that football, I mean, because there's ways and means around all of these things, and like that they haven't been able to put in place some sort of a story at least that actually, no, they were coming over, they got a job, and it was just that they were over, then we said, oh look, you might as well come and join us. Like that's almost the flagrant disregard for the fact that they could quite easily have navigated that.
For sure, and you can be sure that Chelsea aren't the only club doing this sort of thing. In fact, there's a lot of really kind of a lot more grim stories when it comes to kids being exported from Africa and clubs certainly in the Far East, in and around the Indonesia area, which we covered on the radio show previously, that essentially the human trafficking of young footballers from Africa is a horrendous story, and Traore is actually getting a very good life here as a result of Chelsea. The only problem is it's illegal, and because it's Chelsea it's easier to find out, but you can be sure and certain that there's a lot of people who grew up in similar circumstances as Traore who have met a much more grim fate as a result of making the wrong decision and joining up with agents in different parts of the world that they shouldn't have done. But it's an interesting one. We'll see what happens to Chelsea. I don't think it's going to be a transfer ban for this one misdemeanour though.
Yeah, we shall see what happens on that one. There are a few other stories in the back pages this morning, 5 to 8 on this Friday morning, that we wanted to bring you, including Simon Lewis in the Irish Examiner this morning writing about rugby. You might have that piece there, Owen, actually.
Yeah, Simon Lewis talking about this guy from Munster, Gerbrandt. I'm not sure if you've heard about him actually.
Too much.
There was a guy who doped and Munster signed him.
So no lifetime ban, but Grobler facing a lifetime of criticism is the first piece we're going to get to. Let Sleeping Dogs Lie is the essence of it here, as you can see from the menu of little pieces we want to speak about. Also the Chelsea transfers that we've already done there on the back page of The Guardian. Peter Crouch obviously among those as well. The potential Dundalk takeover, and Pádraig Duffy wants done with GA testimonials. So it's all guns on Kerry again, so we'll get Owen to defend all of that in just a few minutes' time. But this Simon Lewis piece in the Examiner just caught my interest this morning. It's very much the tone of it is, he served his time, let's not talk about it. It does at its essence, and there's a bunch of quotes here, including from the Players' Representative Body, Chief Exec Simon Keogh this morning. Like, it does at its core disregard the idea that this story is not about Gerbrandt Grobler, which has been flagrantly ignored for most of the week. Certainly in any conversations we've had, and most of the stuff that you read, it's not really about him. It's not really about him. It's about where does Irish rugby stand on this topic. It's really no more complicated than that as far as I can see it. But like, it does suit the narrative that to disregard that point and say, that anybody who writes or speaks about this thing is having a pop off Gerbrandt Grobler, and that is not what's at play here. So there's a bunch of quotes from Simon Keogh on this, and obviously the representative body are going to come out and say, we support our player. I do wonder what the tipping point on that is as well. I mean, they have a duty of care to a player who's part of their union. Totally get that. He's suggesting that Chris Henry, who's been one of the few active players this week, who's come out and said, actually, you know what, this isn't quite right. And I'm sure, and we're going to be speaking to Carlo del Fava in just a few minutes, but I'm sure most people are going to say, well, Chris Henry, you were in the dressing room with Carlo del Fava when he was in the exact same or similar enough situation. But Keogh suggesting that Henry's view might be different if a player in Grobler's situation was his teammate. And that's exactly kind of the flaw. You'd mentioned a bit earlier on. That's kind of the flaw in this entire thing, that players have been asked to speak about it. And what else are they going to say? Everybody understands that. If Conor Murray is a teammate of Gerbrandt Grobler, he's never going to come out and say this thing is wrong. Like, that would just go entirely against team ethos, and like suddenly they have an internal issue where at the minute it's everybody's united. The media are creating this storm. Conor Murray was saying that it's just all been a load of shit this week was his comment, and Grobler's under a lot of pressure, and I absolutely feel sympathy for Gerbrandt Grobler. He made the decision he made to put himself in that position, but you absolutely feel sympathy for him. But at the same point, we have to speak about this topic. We've an amazing tradition in this country across a load of various topics, including some that are in the headlines at the minute, of burying our heads in the sand and saying, listen, that thing happened a long time ago, let's not speak about it. It's done. There's no point in speaking about it anymore. We have an amazing track record of that in this country, and that we would speak about it, I think, is no bad thing. But anyway, more comments here from Simon Keogh, who himself obviously is a former player. I think World Rugby have done a good job with their Keep Rugby Clean modules, and all we can do is push our players towards that and make sure they're educated and understanding. That's all they can do, says Simon Keogh here. I think if there are any positives to be taken from this, it's that Gerbrandt will serve as a live situation whereby players understand the implications of doing the wrong thing. I don't understand that at all, and I don't think that this case actually serves the purpose of players understanding the implications of doing something wrong. I think that actually, if you're an academy player and you're looking at it and you think, well, I could dope, and you've Finian Wycherley packing down alongside Grobler this weekend, who was mentioned, I think, by Alan Quinlan in the show yesterday, who's like an up-and-coming second-row prospect. And like that's the sort of player that I think we need to get behind and encourage and put our resources behind. It's I don't know. It's been a bit of a fuss this week, and the majority of the criticism of the comment has been about guns aimed at Gerbrandt Grobler, which has really not been the case. That's the Rugby in the Examiner this morning. There's also John Fogarty on. This is where you've got to defend, where the Munster defence comes back into it as well. John Fogarty writing in the Examiner this morning about Duffy keen to axe GA testimonials is the piece here this morning, and obviously it's another chance to get Colin Cooper front and centre here and point both barrels at him. Pádraig Duffy saying here, I'm very clear on this, our organisation doesn't want testimonials. It's the message I've got very clearly over the last few weeks. We're an amateur organisation. We don't reward our players financially. I mean, the GA does reward its players financially all the time. There are players constantly out. We've had a bunch of them in here this week and are happy to have them doing commercial activity.
Indirectly though.
I know, but to say that we don't, that GA players aren't, a select number of GA players aren't rewarded financially is actually just not true.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time here. Basically, if this thing does stop, which there's an argument it probably should, and I'm Colin Cooper retiring next year, suddenly I'm the Gleneagle Hotel down in Killarney, and I'm organising the testimonial for this guy, and it's not a GAA event, it's an individual business, it's a hotel organising this. We're giving you the 100 tables, and that's it, done. Completely separate of the GAA. It just happens to be a GAA player involved. So this isn't a solution to what Pádraig Duffy deems to be an absolutely gigantic problem.
Yeah.
It isn't a gigantic problem.
Yeah, all right. Anything else you want to get to? Is that it?
No, we're done.
Told to get the hell out of here and move on to the next thing. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Keep your comments coming into us on hashtag OTB AM, or leave a comment here on the YouTube page or Facebook or wherever else you're picking us up. So we're going to speak with Carlo del Fava. That's coming up next. But before that, first a snippet of, we mentioned Joe Conroy's been out to chat to the UFC star Darren Till, UFC 2017 fighter who's ranked number 7 in the world at the minute at £170 and honing in on a title shot. He's been speaking to OTB AM at the launch of EA UFC 3.
Maybe tell us about how you ended up going from Liverpool to Brazil.
Are you fishing for the real story, or did you probably say that I went to Liverpool or Brazil?
I can give,
you have to be more specific.
I can give the 5-second story, but for people who aren't aware of your backstory, you're involved in an incident when you were younger, when you were stabbed in a nightclub.
Yeah, I was I wasn't a bad kid or nothing, but like maybe I was involved with the wrong crowd. I don't really know how to explain it to like the casual fan or whatever. But I was training hard, but I was also distracted outside the gym, and I just remember being in a nightclub, getting into like a fight, and that one my mates did, and I remember like going over to help out, and like I remember just being in the midst of it all, and before I knew it, like my t-shirt was bred right, and everyone was saying I'd been stabbed, but I didn't believe it. I was like, I haven't. And then I remember getting dragged outside the nightclub and, just getting rushed off to hospital. And the few weeks of being in hospital, I was on like a life support machine thing type of, because it touched my artery. And then like when I was fully able to leave the hospital and I went back to the gym, I said to my coach, like, oh, well, what should I do now? Like, and he basically told me, like, if you want to be a champion and want to be this great fighter you keep talking about, it's time to like really focus on your career and stop messing about sort of thing. So I said, okay, what do I need to do? And he was like, you have to go to Brazil. They're waiting for you. The Lions Den's waiting for you. So I just said, okay, mate, bye.
And was that a tough decision to make, like leaving your life, your family, everything behind?
Nothing into my mind apart from, okay, do I need to go to Brazil? Okay, sounds, I'll go. I didn't really, I don't know. I didn't care. I don't care.
So when you arrived there, you've got now Portuguese. What's that like? In a new gym.
It's like being a baby when you're crying for something but you don't know how to speak. It's like I couldn't speak to anyone. Everyone must have just looked at me like a clown, and I don't like that feeling. So I was like, I'm gonna have to speak their native tongue now, and I did. It took me a few months,
but you got there. And
Yeah, that's Darren Till, UFC fighter, in conversation with Joe Conroy, and much more of that coming up. A little later today, he speaks about, as a 15-year-old fighting a 26-year-old, and how all that came about in his first pro fight, how he thinks that he's going to finish Conor McGregor as well. So keep an eye on our Facebook channels, YouTube, offtheball.com, all of that good stuff. A little later today, and EA Sports UFC is out on February the 2nd. Now, it's been a huge story here this week, the case of a young rugby player who took some anabolic steroids, was banned for a couple of years, and post that then obviously is back in the game. So we wanted to get a bit of a sense from somebody who'd been there and done that. So it's been a big topic here this week, get a sense of all of that, what drives you to do it, the scale of the issue, and much, much more. And to do that, I'm delighted to say we're joined on the line by former Italy and Ulster forward Carlo del Fava from Durban. Good morning, Carlo.
Morning, Ewan. How are you? You all right?
Very good. Thanks a million for taking our call as well this morning. I don't know what time it is in Durban, actually.
We 10:05 this morning, yeah.
Very good, very good. You're ahead of us. You're ahead of us as always. Listen, your case, obviously, and this is why we want to speak to you, is very similar to the case that has arisen here this week. 20 years of age in your case. You took an anabolic steroid. You were caught. You served a 2-year ban. Can we get straight into it, if you don't mind? Because we're interested to pick through some of the detail of that. We think that it's an interesting test case. Why did you take what you took?
Well, yeah, just wasn't big enough. Wasn't strong enough to cope with the level of rugby that I was playing then. I was in a Super Rugby squad as a 19-year-old, and you've obviously got performance norms that you need to meet and criteria that you need to meet, and I was just nowhere near. I was nowhere near. I mean, a 19-year-old in a Super Rugby squad that can do two pull-ups and a 1-rep max on the bench press is 80 kgs. It's you're way off the mark. So having to try and cope with that pressure of trying to be up there and stay with the group that's moving really, really quickly, you look for a way to try and shortcut that, and it ends you up in hot water, and that's what happened.
Do you remember the specific moment that you thought, I'm going to have to go and do this?
Not really. It was more just compounded effect of that compounding pressure over and over and over of looking for another option, and the more hours you spent in the gym, and the body just wasn't at that stage of development to cope with that sort of workload, you know.
Were you aware of the cliff edge enormity almost, Carlo, of what it was that you were about to do when you chose to take that route?
Do you know what, Owen? I wasn't, and that's the scary part, is that I was so concentrated and so narrow-minded in your focus that you lose sight of the bigger picture completely and utterly. It becomes such a personal thing that you don't actually see the people around you that it affects. You don't see the long-term effects of it. You don't see the compounding effect of having that stigma with you forever. It never goes away. It constantly. I mean, here we are 14 years later, and we're still talking about the same issue, and it's still real as if it almost happened 2 weeks ago. And when you're in that frame of mind, you don't think about it at all. It doesn't even come into your mind. It doesn't even come into question. You're just so focused on achieving that goal that, well, me personally anyway, that you lose sight of all of that completely.
Are there others? I mean, the moment that leads you to that moment almost, are there others? Because I know there was another couple of underage players pinged in South Africa roughly around the same time for roughly the same thing. Like, is it a conversation that you're having around the gym, around the team? Are you aware of others doing it at the time? Like, that might actually almost normalise some of that decision, I guess.
Do you know what? It's quite important that you mentioned that, because it wasn't a conversation that I'd had with anybody else, which was the funny thing about it. It was something that I'd taken in isolation, looking to better myself in the wrong way, and ultimately paying a big price for it. And the consciousness, we were aware of other players being banned for failing doping tests. We were aware of them. We knew the consequences of it. But at the same time, it wasn't something that was spoken openly about it in the group and openly as if it was a casual thing that everybody spoke about, you know. It wasn't that case at all. It was a case of doing something in secret that to better your performance, when in actual fact you didn't actually really need to do it. but in your mind, you thinking this is the right thing to do, this is what I need to do to get to that level, and it's the completely wrong outlook to have about the whole thing as well.
Was there anybody aware that you had chosen this route? I mean, relations, family, friends, was there anybody that you could say, listen, I've taken this road, I feel as if I haven't any option, but this is what I'm doing? Was there anybody you were speaking to about it at that time? Not
at the time when it happened, but literally about 2 hours after the doping officials came to the house to test me. Funny enough, I was actually on my way home back to the Eastern Cape for the Christmas holidays, and I decided to not take the early morning drive down, instead have training, obviously, after training, take a rest, and then drive down after that. And it was in that time that the doping officials came to the house to test me. And I knew straight away, I said, well, that's it, it's all done then, you know. Took the drive back to the Eastern Cape, sat down with my mom and said to her, listen, there's something coming here. This is what I've done. This is what the consequences are probably going to be of what I've done, and just expect something really bad. That was the first time I actually approached anybody about it, and then subsequently when the results came out, the timings were a lot different then. Got tested in middle of December, and the results came out middle of January, really, you know. So it was a month of waiting to see what would happen. Would the results come back? And then when they found the positive test within the system, the disciplinary committee from South African Rugby gave me a ring and said, look, you're suspended instantly for failing a doping test. Please leave the team, and you face obviously disciplinary charges, and you need to have a hearing. I guess you speak to your mom. I guess you don't speak to, I mean, on the basis that maybe I get away with this. You probably don't speak to your club or your employers or your teammates about it in that period. Everyone broke up holidays. Yeah, it wasn't a thing of even trying to think that. Your first instinct is to go for something of confidence, someone you can confide in, somebody that you can obviously express your deepest feelings, and that's who I went to. And at the same time, when you are waiting for the test, when the result came back as positive, that's when you obviously go to everybody and you tell them, look, it's don't even test the B sample. It's a waste of time. I've done what I've done, and you take all the punishment that comes your way. Yeah.
Morning, Carlo. My question here is that I find it hard to believe that this thing can exist in a vacuum. That you mentioned that you were trying to keep up with the rest of your teammates, but at this point you were an under-21 Springbok. You knew that you were one of the most talented rugby players in your age group, so you knew you had the potential to make it. So I find it hard to believe that you invented this idea that you should go out on your own and dope yourself. I'm not sure if this kind of thing can exist in a vacuum. Like, you don't do this thing unless you believe that there is a chance of success, ultimately, do you? Like, surely you thought that you could have gone completely under the radar and nobody would have caught you doing drugs. So, like, was there outside influences? Was there somebody, you don't have to name names, but did you hear of other instances where potentially this thing could be a full success for you?
No, not at all, not at all. And the thing is, there was the complete ignorance around the whole thing as well, and not understanding what the side effects of taking anabolic steroids does to your body, and not understanding what you are actually injecting into your system. It's a synthetic hormone that just causes so much carnage. It's not supposed to be there. The human body is not supposed to ingest that type of thing. And it was obviously that sense of having instant gratification, of seeing a goal so close and wanting it right there and then, and not understanding that there's a process of development that you need to go to be able to play at that top level. And it's not something that just happens straight out of being an under-21 player. And at that time, I was still under 20. I still had one more year of under-21 to play. And I wanted to be that player that played at Super Rugby level, or let alone be involved with it at a really young age. And just not understanding the whole concept of time and development and maturity, and it's a mess. You can't comprehend the ramifications of what you are doing at that age when you're in such conflict of what decisions to make. You know, now you look back and you reflect, and it's easy to make the right conclusion to a decision. But then you aren't really. It's not something that comes to your mind. What you were taking, Carlo, was for bulk, right? Yeah, it was for strength. It wasn't so much for bulk. It was more for strength and for size and to meet the norms in my testing, because I was so way off. It wasn't even on the scale, let alone within the norms. I wasn't even on there. That's how far away I was. But physically, yet on the field, I was able to do what I needed to do. But as far as taking those repeated impacts all the time at that level, that physical capability that I had, I wouldn't be able to do it.
How do you? It was an injection, I think, if I'm right. Am I correct to that?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Do you give that to yourself, or does somebody else give it to you?
Well, you know what, Ewan, I'm actually. It's one question that, because we are on video at the moment, and it is something that I've had previous experience with in answering. It's not something that I can actually answer while on video and while it's obviously open to the public domain, purely because, and I'll give you the reason why. A few years ago, I did a seminar at a school for Keep Rugby Clean and anti-doping, and I was quite involved with the process of educating the youngsters and what they needed to do. And it was under the impact of absolute full disclosure. Ask any question you like, I'll be there to answer it. And I did that. And you wouldn't believe it, but a few months after that, a parent came to me to explain that their son had gone through a similar process after I had spoken to them and after I had done all this awareness program with them. And he had pretty much followed exactly what I had told him was my experience and how I took it. So regardless of what I had said, it made no difference to him. He was still on that road. He was bound to make that decision. And he sort of used the information that I'd given him to use it in the way that he felt fit. So it's very important that there is an awareness that I need to be of what I need to say, obviously on video, and what I need to say when it is being recorded. Because you don't want people to interpret that in the wrong way and use that as a guideline of how to dope. So it's very important that I'm careful how I answer that question.
Just on that point, in terms of speaking to people about doping and telling them to avoid doping in rugby, ultimately, if I'm sitting in a seminar hall listening to what you're saying, obviously I'm affected by what you're saying, and I guess I am deterred to a certain level, but I'm not deterred fully, because ultimately your professional career continues, and I would say if I followed your career, I could still dope, get banned and come back, just like Gerbrandt Grobler is right now, and still get paid and play to a high level. The risk isn't having your career ended, the risk is getting banned for 2 years.
Well, that ban's actually been escalated to 4 now, so you're not coming back after 4 years. 2 years, it's almost, it's a very long time to not do anything. 4 years is a totally different animal completely. You're not the same person physically. It's been escalated to 4, so there's no ways you're coming back after 4 years, regardless.
The Grobler situation at the moment is a 2-year ban for an anabolic steroid, which science proves does give you long-term benefits. So still, when I look at the Grobler situation, and as you say, 4 years is quite a lot in fairness. 2, it is recoverable. Like, you can come back from 2 years. Grobler is doing it. And even yourself, you managed to come back after a 2-year ban. Like, we can get into the length of bans in a moment, but just on that, I'm not sure, is it a deterrent? Is it deterrent enough at the moment to hear your stories and to think that, right, my career is going to be destroyed? I think that it's a fair point to say that your career may go dormant for a couple of years.
Well, the thing is, who then takes you in after that 4-year period? Once you're looking for a place to play, once you're looking for a club to play, well, now all of a sudden Munster have got a policy which I think they would actually adopt, in that they wouldn't actually sign players that have had a history of doping, and they have every right to do that. Obviously, people are very protective of something that they hold sacred, and to have that influence and have that negative stigma around the team, some people can't cope with that. Some people aren't able to look past some people's past mistakes, whether they admitted them or not, and it's just a maturity level, whether they have it or not. It's their own personal thing, Is that something that I've got to deal with on a yearly month? At least every month, something about it comes up, whether it's work related, whether it's past rugby related, whether it's media related, like yourselves. And I'm very outspoken about it because I know the experience that I had. It's not something that we need to brush under the carpet. It's something that the likes of yourself need to bring up and speak about. It's not something that needs to be hidden. It's not something that needs to be put in a cupboard and put in, it's not part of us. It doesn't exist. It does exist, and people need to speak about it. They need to have the courage to face what they've spoken about. So it's important that we answer these hard questions.
Glad to hear you say that, Carlo, because we've a bunch of interesting conversations about having these conversations this week. There's been a lot of conversation as well about South Africa. There's been some sort of euphemisms used during the week about, players coming from a different environment in South Africa or a different culture in South Africa, hinting almost that South Africa has a bigger issue with this thing, which isn't to let Ireland wash our hands of this problem at all. But I am interested to get your take on where South Africa is at in terms of that doping culture currently.
Well, all the provincial players at school level, for instance, if you start at the bottom, they're all tested on a regular basis. All of them that are in a system, whether it's a high performance system, whether it's a system in the provincial leagues, they're all tested. That process is tested. And once you move out of that into an academy system and into a rugby club stroke age group level provincially, as well as Super Rugby, where that's nearly a monthly occurrence where people are tested. It's something that before wasn't a regular occurrence, where now people are tested more often. So to get away with it, it's nearly impossible. But it's interesting because when you look at it from a rugby schoolboy point of view, the volume of players that are playing top-level school rugby in South Africa is huge compared to any other country, purely because of the volume. So if you take that ratio compared to volume of players and people that are caught doping against a smaller country with less players, you'd find a similarity. I'm quite involved with the academy at the Sharks Rugby as well, and quite involved with the school rugby in the province as well. And it's something that comes up all the time, and I'm very outspoken about it because I've got first-hand experience in dealing with it from a coaching point of view, from dealing it from a player's point of view, from dealing it from even the media point of view, and it's something that I spend a lot of time doing and educating the guys on about it, because it's important that it comes from somebody that's done it and that's been there, that experienced the pressures of it. And it could be something that they're thinking about.
Do you think, Carlo, that has an impact, or what are your thoughts about how we make players make better decisions in that regard?
It's education. It's education. The reason why it's a 2-year ban is because anabolic steroid is in your system for 18 to 24 months. It's not something that you take and 2 weeks later it disappears out your system like it would a protein shake. And at that time, that's something that I didn't even realize. I didn't even know. There was an awareness of it. There was just complete ignorance. And that has probably led to the downfall of what I did. Whereas now, with that education system in place, those players understand that, listen, this is something serious. It's not something that you can take and play around with that doesn't have any consequences on your actions. It's something, and the more you educate people about it, the more they're aware of it. And if people are scared to speak about it, nothing will ever get done and nothing will ever change. So that's just my point of view on the whole thing.
I read a comment of yours in the process of researching for this piece that sent chills down my spine, I have to say, and you've just touched on it, and I'd like to get your thoughts a bit further on it here, because the schools game here is a very healthy thing, and as you pointed out already, there are great rewards at the end of it. You were on the record recently saying that at schoolboy level there's a long way to go in the fight against doping. That's possibly the most concerning sentence and aspect of this entire piece.
Okay. Well, it goes back to the education point of view. It's if they understand what's involved in it, then everyone involved in it as well will speak about it, and they'll be able to identify players that are potentially doing it, players that are thinking about doing it. And unless you've got the experience of understanding what those markers are, how would you ever know? You'd never know. So who's the best person to educate them on it is somebody that's got first-hand experience in doing it. So jump in and do it, do the education, and obviously the opinions of people are their own, and how they judge you, it's up to them. It's my personal principle that no matter what happens, I'll still be outspoken about it, and I'll never brush it under the carpet to hide it away as if it wasn't part of my career.
One of the things that's often trotted out around this time is that rugby today isn't as bad as it was 10, 15 years ago, and the chances of doping are getting less and less and less. But you said at the start of this piece that you felt that you weren't big enough to make it to Super Rugby in South Africa. Right now, people need to get bigger, younger. So to me, that seems like the incentive to dope is coming a lot faster at you, and the need to do it is a lot higher, or the actual, I suppose, appeal of doing drugs at this point is a lot higher than it used to be, because you need to be bigger now than you used to be. Do you agree with that, or do you feel that testing is actually working?
No, I agree with you completely. It's a very good point as well. The players nowadays are under a huge amount of pressure compared to what we were, purely because, well, one is social media didn't exist then. It wasn't a thing. Facebook wasn't even invented then. So getting first-hand information is constantly available to somebody. So their esteem to get higher in rugby, they exposed all the time to players that they look up to, and they see what they do, they see how their careers have moved on, the financial benefits of playing at that high level. So they have all of that information to process as well. And they also then have the information to process from their development system, where they have to improve all the time, and not just physically, but technically as well as emotionally on a maturity level as well. So they've got that to deal with too. And you've still got that social pressure of having that constant information at your hand every single time you pick up the phone. You've got that information, you've got that pressure, you're constantly there all the time. And the players that are coming in now that are young, they weren't young, and well, we were young, but we weren't technically sound as these players are now today, which means they've been in the system for a lot longer. So you're talking about somebody who's been in the system for 14, 15-year-old, who's been in an academy system, in a high performance system, and they're getting drip-fed this information constantly all the time. So they're being looked after, one, which is a good thing. They've got that education at hand, which is a good thing as well. But they've also got that added pressure of stay in the system. You're going to be a superstar at 15. Just do what you need to do to get up there.
We're going to wrap in a minute, Carlo. We've had a bunch of comments coming in, and I'll give you a couple of those in a second. But before that, Chris Henry, who I think would have been in the dressing room around the same time as you when you were at Ulster, he was probably just coming through at that point. I don't know if you've seen his quotes this week, but he said it was unacceptable that Munster would sign a proven doper, in his words. Interested to get your take on that. And also, where do you stand on lifetime bans for taking things like anabolic steroids, which are very clear cut in terms of their direct implication? It would be pretty, like when you talk about the education piece and all that, it too would be a pretty big deterrent.
Well, let's start with Chrissy Henry. He's a brilliant player and a top man. He was coming through the ranks when I was at Ulster, and it's a type of player that his character would never ever be in question, never in doubt. Physically, he'd always be the one right on the line, constantly working hard to achieve what he needed to achieve. A good character in the team, a young leader as well at the time too. So if he's quite opinionated about what Munster need to do, I think he's earned the right. He's earned the right to have that opinion, and you've got to respect him for it as well. So it's not somebody that, even though he said that and what he has said and his stance on the whole thing, is not somebody that I wouldn't speak to or chat to about. You know what I mean? We played alongside each other.
I presume you think he's wrong.
Say again?
I presume you think he's wrong.
Not at all. I think he's absolutely right. He's got a stand. He's got a principle. He's got a stand. He's got a view that he's expressed, and it's his opinion, and he's earned the right to express that opinion as well, and publicly too. So you can never hold that against him. I'd be more upset if people didn't have an opinion about it, which means nobody really cared. So the fact that people do have an opinion about it is vitally important.
So just on that lifetime ban question, then where do you stand on that?
Well, it's obviously not a decision that I've got to make. That's a decision that, the powers that be, the World Rugby, it's something that they need to look at. Why have they made it 2 back? Why have they made it 2 years? Why have they now escalated to 4 years? It's not a question that I can answer. It's something that the powers that be will decide. Yeah?
Talk to us about your time at Ulster, Carlo. How high on the agenda was your doping ban when you were signed by Ulster? Did you have conversations with the IRFU about this? Did you have conversations with your teammates in Ulster, or indeed the top brass at Ulster about this? Did it manifest itself in any way at all during your time at the province?
In the beginning, it didn't. I signed from Bourgoin, the French club. Signed from them, did our pre-season. There was nothing. It wasn't really brought up. I was obviously always open to speak about it and have a chat with them and discuss all those things, But at the time, it wasn't something that was high on the agenda. A year into
Carlo, isn't it, that it wouldn't come up almost over the course of like a contract negotiation? It's definitely surprising that the employer side wouldn't say, listen, we know we've got this track record, where do you stand on that now? But you're saying that didn't even come up.
Well, I don't think it was relevant at the time when we were signing a contract. It was more about a performance and where I feel I fitted into the team. If they did want to speak about it, I was more than open to. But at the same time, they obviously knew that I did come with a lot of baggage, And even during my time at Ulster, there wasn't really anybody that brought it up, that had their strong opinions about it. It wasn't really discussed. I mean, I never felt any antagonized by the players by it, or anybody had their strong opinions that they voiced it to my face, at least, We were also at Ulster going through a transition time at that point as well. We had a caretaker coach. Mark McCaw was in for 3 months and then left. So there was other focuses at Ulster at that time, and I was definitely least of those focuses. I was just trying to find a place in the team and where I needed to contribute, It's
a shame it didn't come up. I mean, for all the reasons that you've just outlined brilliantly over the last 15 or 20 minutes, it's a shame that somebody didn't say, listen, here's a guy who chose this path, he regrets it, he shouldn't have done it, it's not a good path to choose for these reasons. It's a shame that somebody didn't say, geez, Carlo, you could actually impart some of the well-communicated points that you're describing now to these guys at Ulster. It feels to me to have been, naive and also a bit of a missed opportunity.
But I think at the time as well, it wasn't something that was really hot topic. There wasn't an issue about it at the time. There weren't many players that were coming overseas that were banned. There wasn't a big controversy about it like there is now. So it's I can understand it from their point of view as well. So it's if they did and they needed some awareness done about it, I was obviously more than happy to do it, because obviously I have a responsibility. I gave up that right to not speak about it when I made that decision to do what I did. So they had all the rights to do that and just try and put me in a position to make others aware about it too.
I just have one last question, Carlo. The piece wasn't really about getting into the culture in South Africa, but just briefly, like when you hear somebody from South Africa getting popped for doping, are you surprised? Like I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that your initial reaction is, oh, not again.
No, totally surprised, because you think all the structures that are in place and all the testing procedures, as well as the level that people are getting tested at the moment, you're thinking, how can someone possibly, after seeing my video on YouTube, they are aware that these things happen, why would you then still go and do that after somebody's trying to explain to you the pitfalls of going down that road?
Because the testing doesn't work, most probably.
Well, it does work because they get banned.
Well, we know that people get banned, but there's a high probability there that there's a lot more people who aren't getting banned. That there are a line that is trundled out quite a bit by cyclists in the Tour de France is that they list off the people who get popped at the start of every tour, and they're like, well, that's great, it shows that the testing is working, but we don't know what fraction that is. You could be right, it could be 100%. I have my doubts.
Exactly. I wouldn't know either. I'm not that involved with the testing side of things, But obviously, for people to get banned, it means there are testing structures in place. If nobody gets banned and later on in their career, when they're up at the top and then they do get banned, then it's like, well, something's not right. But World Rugby are doing a phenomenal job in creating, just with the under-20 system alone, with the championship they have every year, they've got the drug-free sport day, keep Rugby clean day as well. I was very instrumental in doing those awareness programs with them as well. And it's, at that level, it shouldn't happen. It means somebody that's gone out of the system, just exactly what I did, on their own accord, to do something where their ambitions just get way ahead of them and they can't understand the consequences of it.
Carlo, just a couple of comments in before we let you away. Ballyagran on Twitter here, who's a Munster fan, is wondering why there wasn't a huge outcry about Carlo del Fava when he joined Ulster. Also says that Chris Henry's a hypocrite, so I'm not sure if he's coming in on your side there or not. Paul Kennedy says, give it a rest. Okay, we get that you're outraged. That tends to be the general tone of comment that we've gotten over the course of the week. Plenty of people very interested to hear your story, needless to say, and a bit of a flavour of that reaction is from Andrew Loughlin here, who says that Carlo is some man. He speaks extremely well on this, and while he cheated, he's doing all the right things in raising the issues and being so open about it. And you've been very good with your time, Carlo. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat to us this morning. Thanks a lot.
I really appreciate it. Just on that, I mean, Chrissy Henry, if there was any man that would back you up in the heat of the battle, it would be him. As a last man, that's integrity and personality ever needs to be in question, and it's somebody that I'll be on the front line with at any beck and call. Is just is a top bloke, and I really appreciate him for taking that stance as well and be principled. Some guys don't have the courage to stand up and voice their opinion like he has. So he's still a top man in my books.
Yeah, you almost don't expect it from a current player, and we've had enough of those comments this week as well. Carlo, thanks a lot. Take it easy.
Take it easy.
Cheers. Carlo del Fava there on the line from Durban. That was pretty interesting stuff, I have to say. David Sheehan said here, David Sheehan is a sharp operator here. He's even at 25 to 9 on a Friday morning picked up on the fact that Carlo wasn't exactly sure which ginger was which. He said, you've really confused Carlo having two ginger presenters.
I know, yeah, it's a strange one. Maybe it was because I was only sent him a text yesterday and he's thinking that it's just going to be me, and then suddenly he's like, wait, there's another ginger in there? Yeah. What the hell is going on in my screen?
I found that fascinating. Like, I think we should have more of those conversations, and not mentioning the current case was really important over the course of that piece, because it was to get somebody's story who's been there and done that and has come through it, and obviously has his take on it and his reality on it. And there's definitely points of that I would differ with, that you would differ with, that I'm sure people out there would differ with. But the importance of having people on, like Michael Rasmussen in cycling a few weeks ago, and like Carlo del Fava, I just think is really important, and we can't do enough of it.
There's two things. One thing he said that I strongly agree with, and one thing he said that I strongly disagree with. The first thing that I agree with is this whole thing of education. That's so important. The fact that he's going out and telling people not to do drugs from his own standpoint is key. The thing I strongly disagree with is his point about testing. It's like, oh, look at all these people getting popped for doping. I'm sorry, but that does not show that testing is fully working. It shows that some of the tests are working. If you're taking anabolic steroids, there's a huge chance, as he said, it's in your system for 2 years. You are going to get caught and get tested.
I would say that potentially more actually, but
the doping, the goalposts for doping are much more lucrative than they are for actually popping dopers. So the drugs will always be ahead of those testing it. So I disagree with him on that strongly, but I do agree with him that education is the way forward, rather than the kind of slaps on the wrists and stuff that he had previously mentioned with young South African players.
Yeah. Paul Conlon, great interview, lads. Great to hear such honesty from someone who made bad decisions. At least he's taking responsibility now and shedding light on the subject that's bubbling under the surface, and probably a lot more widespread than we think or want to believe. Paul Conlon, I couldn't have described that any better, so thanks for getting in touch with us. And keep your comments coming in on OTB, #OTB AM. We're going to talk to Kevin Kilbane very shortly. He's lined up to chat all things football, so that's on the way very shortly. But it's to football we go. And last night the news broke on the show that an American consortium had completed a 100% takeover of Dundalk Football Club. The two existing owners had sold the club. Resident OTB Dundalk expert Dan McDonnell broke it all down for us. Have a look.
It's now done. It's now finished. They're no longer owned by Paul Brown, Andy Connolly. They're now owned by, from what I can gather, quite a lot of people, really, in that it's a consortium of businessmen backed by Peak Six. I mean, Peak Six are their name that springs to mind because they're the company. There's sort of an equity firm who have that stake in Bournemouth. But
are there any Irish people involved?
As far as I know, no. I think it's effectively American. I think there may well be one English person involved as well.
So do we know who's actually going to run the club?
It's already sort of known that there's a guy called Malachy Brannigan he's been hired by them. He's not like part of the people who own the stake, who would have been the managing director at Derby County and Sheffield United when Nigel Clough was there. Also worked for Everton, for Hull City and a couple of other clubs, and he's basically going to be the CEO, the person who runs the day-to-day affairs. Beyond that, there's still a bit of guesswork or lack of knowledge maybe at this point about what their plans may fully be. My understanding would be they're going to come in, they're going to appoint some staff because they have full-time playing staff and management, but they never had the administrative staff off the field. You're talking about owners who have other business commitments and volunteers effectively backing up 2 full-time administrative staff, So now I think they're going to make a couple of appointments there.
Front of house.
Yeah, have a front of house. Have a fully professional setup. And that's important.
Yeah, that's Dan in conversation with the great Nathan Murphy on last night's Off the Ball. And yeah, so that takeover of Dundalk is complete. That's the inside line there from Dan. There's such a fascinating story on as well, Dundalk, in that they were a club who were pretty obscure club, sort of middling along, as a lot of League of Ireland clubs, just doing very well to survive. And then these two guys came in, invested a whole bunch of their own money and entirely turned the thing around. It does strike me, actually, it struck me a long time before this takeover, but that those two Dundalk owners who seem to have done things as an example to everybody else should be brought into some sort of a programme by the FAI or the people who are running the League of Ireland. I actually think that individual clubs could take their own responsibility and go and meet these guys and try and leech some of the information off them. But there could also be something a bit more structured. 100%.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's a great idea because there isn't enough of this think tank approach within the League of Ireland that there's somebody doing a good idea and suddenly this person doesn't have their club anymore, they've been bought out, and now we should use that resource. I don't think there's enough utilisation of resources in a good way in that manner, and this would be a perfect example of that. This Peak 6 investment is very exciting because they've got a 25% share of Bournemouth. So
it's everywhere. Is it Roma?
They have Roma as well, but certainly
one of the chief shareholders is certainly one of the Italian clubs.
Yeah, so you would like to think that there might be a stem to the tide of like really good League of Ireland players who will inevitably go to England. Like it is just the state of progression.
Does that stem the tide, or does that turn the tap on a little bit?
I'm not sure about that. Like it definitely doesn't increase things. It definitely is not going to accelerate the rate that we've seen over the last couple of years, which I suppose if you do got a high rate of players going to England from the League of Ireland, it probably shows that the League of Ireland is in as good health as it could possibly be in. But at the same time, these guys have enough money invested in this thing for this to be a success. This isn't an investment for Dundalk to be a feeder club for League One or the Championship, that's for sure.
Or the league in its entirety to be a feeder league for other leagues.
Exactly, and if you've got players who are coming up through the Bournemouth Academy who are on the fringes of the squad, who may be too young to make it into the first team squad at Bournemouth, suddenly the Dundalk could become a loan option for Bournemouth. And with that sort of, I know you're a kid only growing up, they're not exactly going to give you the trade secrets of what's going on at Bournemouth, but any sort of Premier League Academy experience that might be able to be brought into the League of Ireland even for a couple of seasons is surely no bad thing. I just think with the money that's invested here, I think there's a long-term project to get Dundalk back into the group stages of the Europa League. In fact, I wouldn't say that's even an end. I would say that's a target. I would say that's like officially...
Cork City might have something to say about that, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other clubs out there too who'd fancy themselves as doing similar things.
For sure, exactly. But I wouldn't say...
It's hard to sustain more than one amazing team in the League of Ireland at any one time.
That's the thing.
Proven track record.
And also doing these seasons back to back, as we saw with Dundalk in the previous season, because inevitably if you've got players who are good enough to play in the group stages of the Europa League,
they're gone.
There's a lot of English teams who will say they're good enough to play for us. So they're, as I say, it is an absolute end game to get into the Europa League group stages for them again. This isn't some sort of dream as it might have been previously for Dundalk. This is a goal, and I wouldn't be too surprised if they do manage to achieve it again soon.
Great excitement around the office yesterday afternoon when we launched a brand new Off the Ball show. It's the Keith Andrews Show. It's coming at you every Thursday at lunchtime. And Keith is going to be interviewing all manner of different guests over the course of this run, and also giving his thoughts on all things football and breaking down tactics. There's lots of good stuff coming your way. It'll be every Thursday at lunchtime. As I said, it launched yesterday. He spoke to the Wolves defender Matt Doherty, who's at 25. He can still be described as an Ireland prospect, yet to make his debut. Perhaps one of these players that Martin O'Neill is going to bring into his plans, into his next squad. Megan Campbell, The full interview with another Ireland defender, Megan Campbell, is available as well. It's all over on offtheball.com. You can check out our YouTube channel or on Facebook. It's all there every Thursday, as I said, from lunchtime. You can subscribe. Turn on your notifications as well, by the way, and it'll tell you every time Off the Ball is about to go live with a brand new show, or a brilliant existing one like that Keith Andrews show. So here's a clip of that, Megan Campbell, on what it's like playing for Man City.
I think I went home on the Sunday, and on the Wednesday I had flown to Abu Dhabi and signed my contract over there, so I couldn't ask for a better start, basically.
So it was a bit of a stark contrast, isn't it? You've gone that real drought there, Francis, then you've gone run up in the States, and now next of all you're at one of the biggest football clubs in the world.
Yeah.
That's just fairy tale stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's unbelievable, and the programme that they've put in place from 2014, where they've turned professional on a full-time basis with the women's team, and to see where it is and where it's at now, it's phenomenal. Like last year winning the treble, and hopefully win the Continental Cup now again, or in the final again. So it's just the progress from 2014 to now. When you look back on it, we do it as a team sometimes, and just to see where we've all come from and to where we are today, and it's phenomenal. But I think for every young player looking in on it, as a girl, it shows them the path that you actually can succeed. And obviously,
how important is that we have people like you, women like you now playing and being that, role model? And it's probably a bit unfair to throw in because you're still only 24. But yeah, there's girls that aspire to be you now. You are playing from the biggest football clubs in the world, whereas maybe when you were growing up, did you have that type of role models, or was it mainly the men's team, or was there as much profile around it when you were growing up? Whereas now there's certainly a lot more profile around the women's game, isn't there?
Yeah, the profile has definitely grown. I think back in the day when I was at that age, looking over it, there was a lot of male footballers that I'd look up to, especially at national level. But then you had the likes of Arsenal, who were doing phenomenally, and the likes of Emma Byrne and Keira Grant and Yvonne Tracy. They were all over there, and Niamh Fahey. And as the game grew, obviously more girls went abroad and noticed that if I want to continue success, then unfortunately you have to leave Ireland and go to these professional clubs abroad. And but it's an honour for me to be able to say that I'm a role model for young girls to be able to look up to, and to hopefully one day be able to be in my boots and playing at Man City.
Yeah, Megan Campbell there in conversation with Keith Andrews on the brand new Keith Andrews show, coming your way every Thursday on the Off the Ball social channels. It's 8:45 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us. We're going to talk football now. We're going to talk about Alexa Sanchez and Mkhitaryan going in opposite directions. Theo Walcott and the Ox agents running football, and the massive fees they've been garnering and continue to garner. That figure is only on one very strong upward trend. Most ridiculous story of the year so far. VAR and get Kevin's thoughts possibly on the games at the weekend. And the Kevin we speak about is Kevin Kilbane, who's live from his mansion in Manchester. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning, lads. How you keeping?
How's it going?
Very good, very good. How are you?
Good. Peter Crouch to Chelsea. So last week we spoke about Andy Carroll. I certainly offered the idea that this was one of the most ridiculous stories I'd ever heard, and now it's been replaced by an even more ridiculous story. What are you thinking?
So is that actually been reported now?
It's been reported that Andy Carroll's ankle injury means he's out for a significant period of time, enough to put Chelsea off him, and that now they're turning their attentions to the great Peter Crouch, who turns 37, I think, this month.
Yeah, well, I heard Nathan talking about it on the show last night, and I thought it was bizarre when I heard that one. Regards Peter Crouch, that is. I don't understand it. I don't understand the logic. I don't understand the logic, first of all, in Andy Carroll, certainly for Chelsea. You only need to look at the way that Chelsea play, and you look at the style of football that they're trying to maybe implement. They rarely ever get into wide positions. They rarely ever get to the byline and swing crosses over to the far post. They're a side that like to do a lot of. It's kind of midfield players arriving from the edge of the penalty area. So it doesn't make sense to me. Perhaps it's even more bizarre. But Antonio Conte might want a different sort of striker because that's why he simply hasn't worked out there for Chelsea.
Yeah, or else it's just Antonio Conte, who there's more links this morning about Luis Enrique potentially getting his gig. Unless it's like Antonio Conte saying, listen, I'm out here anyway, so I'm going to do one of the most ridiculous things that's ever been done in football. Let's not rule that out.
The thing is, it's probably not him as well. I'm led to believe that that's why he simply wasn't his signing anyway. So He's had Batshuayi in there. He's really given him a chance. And he just doesn't look a Chelsea player. A lot of the balls bounce off, and his first touch looks quite poor at time. He doesn't look the sort of link-up man that Chelsea would need. And Morata simply isn't working at the moment. He's not in the greatest of form over the last month or so. Maybe, I don't know. You're saying he's just trying to balls the club up, and then that's it. He can walk away into the sunset with his few quid in his back pocket. Is that it then?
Might be just me, Kev, you know.
It's a good theory, I think.
Very cynical man, Adrian, yeah.
Like, if you're going to pick a crap striker to sign for Chelsea, it just doesn't make sense that Peter Crouch is the guy you go for, because Alvaro Morata, 6 of his 10 goals this season have come with his head. Peter Crouch is the all-time leading goal scorer when it comes to headers in the Premier League. You're literally signing somebody who will provide something different for Chelsea, who does the exact same thing that Alvaro Morata does well.
Yeah, but he's been struggling though.
Not with his head though, really.
Owen, hasn't he? Yeah, but he has been across the last. If you look at Morata over the last 6-8 weeks or so, his form has been quite poor. He hasn't been at it like he was early on this season. But you're right in saying it. A lot of the ball, you look at that link up he's had with Azpilicueta, deep crosses coming into the area. That's where he has been thriving. I mean, I don't know, lads. I'm probably Adrian's maybe almost laughing it off to start with, and I'm probably with you. It seems totally bizarre to me. Why on earth you'd go and get a player that's well into his 30s? There was talk of him actually retiring at the end of last season in general from football. Now all of a sudden Chelsea coming in for him. I find it absolutely bizarre. I genuinely can't see it. If they do go out and get someone like Peter Crouch, I don't understand what the benefits are in it.
Let's talk to you about some of these other transfers that are about to happen or have happened already. Definitely interested to get your thoughts on Theo Walcott's move to Everton. So this is sort of the constant great hope of English football that never quite really reached it. But I mean, he's at Everton. He's got a manager like Big Sam who's going to put the arm around him and instill a whole bunch of confidence in him. And I mean, you know, I'm interested to get your thoughts about where he and Rooney fit in, and also about that sort of Big Sam impact. Can he be the one who kicks Theo Walcott on here?
Well, I mean, it seems to me, and it seemed to me over the last few years, I think he needed to get away from Arsenal. I do. I think he's gone stale. His career is certainly levelled out dramatically over the last few years, and I think it's probably the right time for him to move. As for moving to Everton, Everton desperately need pace in the team. They're seriously lacking that. They've got a lot of players that can make passes. They've got players that like to drop deep. A lot of players that like to come towards the ball. They've not got a lot of threat running in behind opposition defences. Theo Walcott essentially should provide that with his pace, and I think from that aspect, I think it's a decent signing for Everton. The only thing I would say, and it's the same for Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, it's the same even for Alexis Sanchez now as well, who looks as if he's leaving. I think there's got to be serious questions at Arsenal and how Arsene Wenger is developing his players, because there's so much potential with a lot of the players that they've signed. Alexis Sanchez over the last year has he progressed? I think he's actually, I wouldn't want to say gone backwards, but certainly levelled off again. Alexis Sanchez is another one, and it's almost as if you're looking at Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain now. You're looking at the level of performances he's producing for Liverpool, and you're scratching your head thinking, why isn't he able to produce this at Arsenal? Why weren't we seeing that on a consistent basis? Now. The same can be said for Walcott. I think Theo Walcott's looking at Oxlade-Chamberlain thinking, it might be better for me. It might be good for me to move away. I might get I might get different ideas going into my head. I might be able to work with a different coach. I might be able to play to a few of my strengths because of Arsene Wenger's methods, philosophies, whatever word you want to use. But Arsene Wenger, he essentially would say to his players, look, I trust you. You'll be able to go out and produce it without necessarily having that individual coach. And you look at Raheem Sterling. I look at him we were looking at him maybe 18 months ago, a year ago, when he'd first gone into City and thinking he might be the next Theo Walcott. He might be that player that doesn't necessarily go on and progress. Look what Raheem Sterling's done this season. Individual coaching, one-on-one basis. And I think that's why he's gone on, because Pep Guardiola has literally got into him and essentially seen his strengths and weaknesses and said, look, you need to be able to do various things within your game to help you get better. And I think that's why Walcott's desperate to get away from the place. I think that's why he might be a good signing for Everton going forward.
Yeah, just on that point about Arsene Wenger, Kev, I wonder, has he ever been good at developing talent? I think there's a very clear difference we need to outline here between talent identification and talent development, that Wenger has been able to spot all these really talented guys in the academy and they've never made it to the top level, and then people will be like, oh, well what about the likes of Thierry Henry and that? Well, like Henry, Bergkamp and Vieira came from AC Milan, Inter Milan and Juventus. These guys were probably going to make it to the top level anyway. The fact that he identified them well, thumbs up for that. But I don't think he's ever been good at developing talent and making them overachieve.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that, Owen. I would, and I look at what Arsene Wenger had when he first went into Arsenal. When he first went into Arsenal, he had real characters, real leaders. He had real players on the training ground that would actually help players develop. I'm looking at the Keons, the Adams, the Dixons, the Winterburns, all these sort of players that were around that club when he first went in there. I think they helped the next generation, which was the Patrick Vieiras, the Emmanuel Petits, the Robert Perez. And I think then, even in turn, Martin Keown was still around when Henry, of course, signed for the club. But I think he was driving standards every day. I don't think Arsene Wenger is that sort of manager that's driving the standard of training to a high level every single day. And I think that's largely down to the fact why the likes of Henry started to progress and do so well. Over the last 10 years, it's no coincidence that those real characters, those real leaders who were really, really good on the training ground have left Arsenal, and Arsenal have had a serious decline since then.
So, tangentially, Sanchez is leaving. We're told he's on his way to United. Apparently he had verbally agreed, I don't know where we've heard this story before, Kevin, but he verbally agreed to stay at Arsenal. He'd shaken hands on it. But it turns out that not worth the paper it's not printed on. So anyway, look, he's off to United. He's going to get 500 grand a week. I do wonder if, United have areas that they may need to strengthen in, other than up front. Is this a bit of a luxury buy for United?
Yeah, well, I think he certainly improves them, doesn't he? I think we know that. He gives them something different. I think he can play through the middle, he can play off the left or off the right. Gives them a different option. I think the one area where Jose Mourinho this season is continuously, I think he's perhaps has missed a trick at times by not getting Martial and Rashford into the side. He's continuously played Mata. He's used Mkhitaryan early on this season off the right-hand side. I think it might be a chance to get Sanchez into the team, perhaps maybe on the right of a front three up front. I think it makes United a lot stronger. There's a lot around this deal that doesn't maybe sit well with me. Last 6 months of his contract, the fee that they're supposedly getting for him, I think that's huge. Agents' fees around this. The agents' fees is probably the more pressing matter, I think, within this one. 7 to 10 million, supposedly they say around about 10 million. The fee that Manchester City supposedly balked at, they were never going to pay that sort of fee for an agent. And United are paying it. United's agents' fees bill over the last 2 or 3 years has been astronomical. And I feel that it's way too high. I think the game maybe need to do something to stop this size of fee. I understand that an agent who's doing a great job for a player, his client, 10 to 15%, yes. But the agent's fees now, they're almost half what the transfer value is, or half what the player's contract's worth. I just think it's getting way out of hand. And I think that sort of money could be staying within the game.
Yeah, well, there was a report in the Telegraph yesterday that the Premier League and the Football League are going to launch a review into all of this and sort of see where they're going. I think it was like a 40% increase in Premier League agents' fees over the 12 months up to January 2017. I think it was up to over 200 million, or in that sort of range, up 60% in the Championship. Like, they're phenomenal monies. And from what you're saying, you obviously subscribe to this theory that this is money that isn't going back into the game. But like, in a lot of ways, it is kind of monopoly money that these clubs have, that they kind of throw around just to get business done.
But it's you still got to have an element of responsibility, though, Adrian. That's what I would say with it. And it seems that an agent now, as you say, it is monopoly money. There's so much money within the game now. So, as we've spoken about maybe in the past, transfer fees, wages, it's almost becoming irrelevant. So I suppose, yes, the agent's fees would rise off the back of that. But now, an agent can demand anything that he wants, and there's got to be some, because the legislation has changed over the last 4 or 5 years regarding agents' fees. Agents now can now demand anything they want. And how on earth can a club with anyone within the right mind start to be paying an agent 10 million? Look at Ross Barkley's deal. Ross Barkley moves for Chelsea for 15 million. An agent's paid 7 million off the back of it. It's just crazy stuff, and I just think it's wrong. I do think it's wrong. I don't see any sort of reasoning why an agent should be paid that sort of money. Mino Raiola, look at him, who's taken Ibrahimovic, he's taken Lukaku, he's taken Mkhitaryan to Man United. The fees that he's been paid over the last couple of years by Man United, it's just I find it bad for the game. I do. I don't think it's great in any way, shape or form, and I don't think it's going to change maybe going forward. And that's why I think the Premier League, the FA, whoever it's going to be, or maybe the authority in general, FIFA, I think they need to get hold of this one, because I think it's getting out of hand.
I don't fully agree with that, Kevin. UEFA released a report this week to show that agents got 13% of all transfers between 2013 and 2017. So I don't think they're exactly getting...
Yeah, but we're talking at the top end, though, Owen. We're talking at the top end, which is always the case, that maybe starts to cloud maybe a lot of judgment. Across the board, that's 13%. But I think the top fees, how can you justify Ross Barkley going to Everton and an agent being paid $7 million?
Well,
how can that be justified?
In this UEFA thing, they say the typical agent commission for smaller deals of less than 100,000 was 40%. So that would suggest that the smaller deals are actually getting a higher percentage in terms of an agent's fee. I just think, okay, I do agree with certain aspects that you're saying, and there is a problem here. But I do think there is an overreaction. Like, you have Alex Ferguson coming out and calling Mino Raiola a shitbag a couple of years ago, or was it last summer? And there's just this there's this picture painted of these agents as complete villains. Why haven't these players left their agents? If they're so bad for the game, why haven't the players left them? They're getting them a nice profit, as Adrian says, essentially monopoly money. The money's going to be in these football clubs anyway. And you have these Anderson quotes with Andy Mitten this week, which we spoke about. He loves George Mendes. He managed to get him a great deal. He managed to bring his football career to the level it could possibly get to. And essentially, I think that the players are the guys benefiting here. And if they were these villains that Alex Ferguson likes to paint them as, then I would see a lot more players. There would be an exodus almost from agents. No.
Yeah, well, I'd never suggest the villains, because at the end of the day, if an agent can get it, they're going to take that sort of money. The problem being, look how many agents are getting that sort of money. I would probably say it's 3 or 4 agents right at the top end. You look at the equal spread across the game within agency, and I think you find it wouldn't necessarily be being even spread. You look at George Mendes. Yeah, the reason why you're with those agents is because those agents have almost monopolised the game, where they've got the real top clubs. They've got all the chairmen, the owners of the football clubs. They've got their ears, and those owners and chairmen will only essentially, at the very, very top end, that is, deal with those big agents. So across the board, a lot of the agents are getting moved out of the game. They're not able to get into it, and it's almost as if they're getting pushed away because those real top agents are getting all the deals. My big, how can I go back to my point? What I was saying to there, and how can it be right that agents are getting that type of fee from deals going into football clubs? Mino Raiola, that was when Paul Pogba was at United originally, when Alex Ferguson called him whatever he called him. He called him that because he was basically trying to manipulate Paul Pogba, and he's probably done right by Paul Pogba. And again, that's not my issue. But my issue is the size of fees that agents are getting paid now, because they're saying the top 5 or 6, maybe 10 players in the world, they're under 1 or 2 agents. So ultimately, an agent can demand what he wants to get that player into the football club. That cannot be right, I don't feel. Yeah,
like I had that UEFA thing about the lower clubs there, actually, because I wanted to ask you about that. And like just to repeat it again, that the smaller deals of less than 100 grand are garnering 40% towards the agent in these deals, which I just find absolutely incredible. Like, I know you've got good sources at the likes of Preston North End and stuff, and I know that the deals would be bigger than 100 grand there, but maybe you know people down in League 1 and League 2 where 100 grand might be the going rate for a transfer here. Is this a serious problem down in those divisions that we don't know about? Like 40% seems absolutely ridiculous for a transfer.
Well, yeah, I think that is the thing. I mean, yeah, again, just maybe back to the original point we're talking, that the higher you go, the percentage it's less, obviously the more money that's going to be paid anyway, so we know that. But you're right in saying that. But that it's always been a problem there, and we've had Fintan Drury on the show over the last year or two saying that when legislation changed, it was about 3 or 4 years ago now, within agency, it basically became an open court. It became an open ball because what happened was anyone could become an agent. You, I, agent, anyone can become an agent now, and that's the thing. What happens within the game now? You don't necessarily need a license. You could actually represent the player if you're doing the right thing by him. But the problem being, as you say, further down the line, even at youth football now, youth football agency within youth football, you see agents now, they're going scouting players at 7, 8, 9. We spoke about it this week. The money that's in the game at youth football within the academy system now, agents are starting to recognise that there's a way and there's opportunities for them at that level. And again, if you're doing the right job, I have got no problem with that. There is no issue with that as well. But that percentage of the fee, it's not in proportion with the rest of the game. And I don't know, there's a number of issues I think that do need to be addressed, but the top end is of real concern to me, I feel.
A couple of things before you go, Kev. Where are you at this weekend?
I'm with Nathan at Southampton on Sunday.
Yeah. 4 o'clock on Sunday. Very good, live on Off the Ball on Newstalk. There's been one question that's been nagging me. Apart from where your branding is this week, you were very much on brand last week, but it seems to have sort of slipped off the radar this week. But there's been one question that's been nagging me over the entire conversation since you came on at the very start. What's in a Kevin Kilbane giant American-style fridge?
Oh, let me have a look first.
Come on, let's have a look. No, come on. Do the reveal on camera. Come on. You can't be having a cheeky peek.
Come on, lads.
Come on. I imagine there's like one bottle of Heineken. I don't know what you're thinking, but let's have a look. What could possibly be in there that you don't want us to see? This is... it's pretty well stacked.
A lot of chocolate in there.
Cadbury going on.
Lucozade.
Yeah. Beer. I knew there'd be beer. Look at the beer.
And a
Kev, is there any actual food in there that's worth eating? Like, what do you have for breakfast?
Eggs, of course.
Chocolate eggs. Oh, look at this.
Yeah.
Oh my God, get yourself to the shop, man. That is you're not a student anymore, Kev. You're 40, for God's sake. Listen, have a good weekend.
All right, lads.
And here, I like the earrings, by the way. Nice earrings.
Oh, cheers. Very good.
Good luck.
Good man, take it easy, lads. Good luck. Have a good weekend.
Good luck, take it easy. Kevin Kilbane there on the line to talk football, as he does every Friday. Fridge full of beer.
Yeah, incredible. Hardly surprising.
Student 101 right there, isn't it?
Well, students wouldn't be having Bex to be more Dutch gold, he's kind of like a middle class student, really.
Posh, you're all about the middle class, aren't you? We're almost time to leave you. We do want to give you barometer on the way, by the way. Obviously, I mean, people are in contact saying, well, where's the barometer? It's coming. Sean Ingle, who's the chief sports writer with The Guardian, was with Nathan on last night's Off the Ball and Newstalk, chatting about tennis, celebrating Sharapova's return. She's the poster girl for the Australian Open in Melbourne. Her return to the game, sports fans as well turning a blind eye to doping. This was from last night's show.
What worries me, though, is that people don't, and this is a broader point, but people don't seem to accept nuance anymore. They don't seem to. I mean, well, not all people, but too many people, aren't willing to sort of say, well, this isn't black and white. There are greys here. This isn't ideal. I think it is tied in with identity. It's tied in with just the way we are now. I always found it bizarre when the economy was crashing around people's ears. You'd have all these people, again, getting wild on social media about football and not having the same reaction about people struggling with, their lives and so on. But that's perhaps the way we are hardwired psychologically. If you put two sets of people on a team blue and a team red, that team, suddenly, if you're in team blue, you think you're best of your team and you think less of team red. I think that's just perhaps how we are. But I'm no psychologist, but that's my instinct.
The always interesting Sean Ingle on Off the Ball last night. You can check out that full piece on offtheball.com. It's 6 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning, and as always, around about this time, it is time for the barometer. With a bit of a tweak this week, it has to be said. It's my pick of things that have happened over the course of the week, and increasingly so, I'm turning to social media for my inspiration. And normally it's a kind of a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 of things that have got my interest, but this time it's 12 in reverse order, I know. We've had some interesting commentary this week and comments, particularly on social media, in relation to our conversation about doping in rugby in this country and further beyond. So that's where we're going this week. And in at number 12 is all over the Twitter machine. So let's take a look at number 12 on the barometer this week. It's our first tweet. If we can bring that up, we'll tell you exactly what's going on. So this was following your conversation with Alan Quinlan yesterday. This was Dara, so we're straight in here. This was the most abusive that it got over the course of a week. Shut that bleep up, you bigoted bunch of wankers. Give it all a rest. Bunch of horrible wankers. Said Dara on Twitter. But I did enjoy Caleb's response there at the end. Some good, well thought out points there, Dara. It's a pretty interesting abuse there for Owen and Alan Quinlan during the week. That was number 12. Next up on the barometer this week, we have Over the Hill Prop, who's busy. But that's to be said. As you can see, this was a train of thought from Over the Hill Prop. I do, however, have an issue with the moral crusade this is turning into, particularly for Off the Ball and for The Independent, and generally for Communicore Media. They're running self-fulfilling jerk circle of articles, interviews, clickbait and segments. I mean, it doesn't get any more concise than that from Over the Hill Prop.
At least being in a jerk circle means you've got friends.
Next up on the barometer this week is David Butler, who says it is exactly what you're doing. If he had been caught doping recently, I'd understand, but he served his ban and signed last August. How did any of you not raise this when he signed? Too busy with other stories, a slow week, and this lad gets dragged over the coals. Disgraceful. I mean, it has been a slow week, apart from being on the brink of these Six Nations, right in the middle of Champions Cup, obviously, and, as if there wasn't any other football stories to talk about. There's a fairly busy transfer window, and obviously the ongoing saga that's now come to a head with Martin O'Neill. So, no, to be fair, it has been a pretty slow week. Next up on the barometer of contacts this week from Dermot Higgins here, who's linking a story to Carlo del Fava, who we spoke to a little bit earlier on. Where was all the outrage and condemnation back then? Off the ball, Kimmage and the like are just putting the boot into Munster, or the boat, as he phrased it. I hope that Grobler plays on Sunday and you will see the support he gets. Stand up and fight, says the hashtag there. Now, he's not playing on Sunday. He's playing for the Munster A team tonight, I think, actually, as it turns out. But yeah, I mean, look at Dermot fairly reflective of the general commentary into Off the Ball this week.
Many other people have put boats into Munster. The Titanic docked in Munster.
That's a good point. Fair point. Next up on the barometer this week is a contact from Brendan Crowe. Shame on you for the witch hunt that you're perpetrating. Hashtag Grobler. Why now? Bandwagon, Dublin-centric media. That's why. So there's been a lot of... I mean, most of the profiles of... There's been a lot of support, by the way. I shouldn't misrepresent what's gone on this week. There's been a lot of people saying, listen, it's an important conversation to have and we should have it. And everybody's entitled to their view, but generally the profiles of the contacts along the lines of that previous one that we've clicked into, generally they're from somewhere there or thereabouts in the Munster region. Next up on the barometer this week, Mark Finnegan, another man who's been busy abusing us this week, and this was a good one. I mean, it did get one like. The man served his suspension. He has a right to a second chance. This is a load of shite brought on by that wanker Kimmage, and fans, I tell you, they're sick of it. Yeah, I thought Paul wouldn't mind being brought into the conversation in this context, I don't think.
No, Paul Kimmage comes into the office every morning and is like, this is your agenda, boys.
Absolutely.
And he threatens us.
Stock it to them.
And he's like, don't you dare talk about anything else but this story. And then he walks out of the office. And if we dare not talk about this, then Paul Kimmage comes back in and sues every one of us.
The fans are sick of it, though, you know. Next up on the barometer this week, I don't know where this ends, by the way, I have no great idea, but we'll keep going as long as... Another one that got a lot of interaction this week, one like from O'Shea. Another slow news day then after a weekend full of sport. This is all you can come up with. Gobshites, the lot of ye. Next up, let's skip through a couple of these, is Paul Walsh. There'll be no witch hunt, no affected indignation. I mean, that's what it's been. And no practised outrage, faux outrage as I might call it, from any of you Leinster fanboys. If Grobler had signed for the Goys instead of Munster. Hashtag bullshit. No, this one got 2 likes, so I mean, it did a bit more.
Well, the use of the word guys is very funny, in fairness, so that's probably the second like where that's coming from.
It was worth it for that alone. Next up on the barometer, we're not out yet, we've Noel here. It's a witch hunt, nothing else. Anti-Munster as well, which is a theme of the previous one as well, which, yeah, I mean, presented without comment, I think, is my only comment on that. Is that it? Is that the end of the barometer? No, they keep coming. Marcus Lynch had his say 21 hours ago. He said, I hope Grobler plays and becomes a first choice Munster player now, giving into this liberal... I mean, we know we're there when we're a liberal mob mentality. We've 2 more, I'm told. Next up, Ito O'Hanlon, on and on and on and on and on. About both Martin O'Neill and Gerbrandt Grobler. Do they know there are other sports too? I switched off last week, sure, you'd be sick of it.
Probably Ita, if she's from Munster.
It could be Ita. Yeah. Ita, you said potato. And finally from Ed Ryan here, has it occurred to the off-the-ball team that the public are just not that interested in the Grobler thing? 2 weeks of it now. Jesus Christ. So, I mean, I don't know how Ed _M_Ryan feels about us having Carlo del Fava on this morning, but that's a bit of a flavour. Generally sort of presented without comment, just to give you a bit of a flavour of what's going on out there this week. Not entirely representative of the entire commentary we've had. As there's been a whole bunch of people who've been enthused and enjoyed the conversations we've had, and also feel like us that they're important, and that it's not a witch hunt, that it's not anti-Munster, that it's nothing to do with the Dublin media, that it's actually nothing to do with Munster, that it's nothing to do with Gerbrandt Grobler per se, but just that it's an important conversation to have. That's the barometer this week.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Let's have a 12-point plan from now on.
I'm not sure we can do 12 points every week. That's kind of it. I don't know if you have anything left to say on. I'm
just going to say that I can shut down all those Twitter accounts that I set up during the week now, and my job here is done.
And rest easy for the weekend.
Absolutely. Go Munster.
Coming up on 9:15 on this Friday morning, it's going to be a busy weekend of sport right across the Off the Ball channels, including on News Talk with Nathan on Saturday and Joe on Sunday. As you heard, live commentary, that Southampton-Tottenham game with Kevin Kilbane. So that's on News Talk. And now that's what I call sport on 98 FM on Sunday morning from 9 a.m. with Jamie Moore. And also on Today FM with Phil Egan and Neil Tracy. Here's a flavour of what's coming up there.
Coming up on Premier League Live at Sky Sports, we have commentary of Burnley and Manchester United from Turf Moor. Dave McIntyre and Brian Kerr. And Stephen McPhail is this week's guest in the boot room. So join us at 2 o'clock on Today FM tomorrow.
And join Owen and Ger right back on OTB AM on Monday morning from 7:45. But from us for the minute, good morning.